Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this Achates live session on Thursday, the 8th of September. Today's session will focus on the subject of in-kind corporate support and what effective in-kind partnership working looks like. Our discussion today is going to be chaired by our Director of Development, Deborah Larwood, who I'll be handing over to in a moment. So to introduce myself, my name is Alex Mayer and I'm a senior consultant here at Achates. We're a creative consultancy with a holistic approach to recruitment, fundraising and strategy development. We take our name from Greek and Roman mythology. Achates was the close friend and loyal advisor to Aeneas. So we think our name quite neatly describes the relationship that we offer to our clients within the cultural sector. We set up Achates Live to support the sector, bringing fundraisers and other arts professionals together in order to discuss key topics and also to enable you to help and support one another. Whilst we acknowledge that Achates doesn't necessarily have all of the answers, what we absolutely do have is an overview of the cultural sector, and we're incredibly passionate about using this perspective and role in a supportive way. These live streams began as a way for us to support the sector during the first lockdown, and they've continued on a regular basis since then, driven by topics that you, our viewers, have requested. Today's session, as I have mentioned, will be focused on in-kind corporate support, a timely topic in light of the recent Private Investment in Culture survey published in June. This noted that corporate giving has been in decline over the last 3 years and now represents only 15% of total private investment in our sector. So today we've brought together a panel which will examine different forms, scales and models of in-kind corporate partnerships. We'll be delving into how they've established and delivered key partnerships. And with their experience in mind, we'll be asking for their thoughts on how corporate fundraising in the cultural sector might evolve in the future. So finally from me, just a brief bit of housekeeping to say that all of the information shared in today's conversation is of course live and correct at the time of broadcast. Now I am delighted to be able to welcome our special guests who will be exploring this topic with us today. Firstly, Mayanne Plain, Deputy Director of Development at Artichoke. Hi, Mayanne.
Hi.
Hello. So Artichoke work with artists to create extraordinary and ambitious public art in cities, the countrysides and coastlines around the UK. Mayanne has worked in arts fundraising for over 12 years. In her current role at Artichoke, she's worked across the whole of the UK and Northern Ireland on statutory bids, award-winning sponsorships, in-kind partnerships and EU funding. Prior to joining Artichoke, she worked at the Institute of Contemporary Arts, where she led on trust bids for multi-year projects, international partnerships and educational initiatives. She spent 3 years at the Prince's Foundation for Children and the Arts, where she was responsible for managing a roster of corporate partners, including Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, ICAP and GAM. She also oversaw the stewardship and cultivation of over 30 celebrity ambassadors and their involvement in several high-profile events, as well as partnerships with media companies such as Sky Arts, Classic FM and Jazz FM. She was previously on the board for Sound UK and Artbox UK. Our second guest today is Rosa Corbishley, who is Development Director at Bristol Beacon. Hello, Rosa.
Hello.
Hi. Bristol Beacon is, of course, a renowned music venue, charity and music education hub. And Rosa has worked in senior leadership roles as a fundraiser and marketeer at a number of significant cultural organisations, such as Bristol Beacon, Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra, Salisbury International Festival, Arts About Manchester, which is now the Audience Agency, the Royal Northern College of Music, Sydney Symphony Orchestra and others. She's been in her current role as Development Director at Bristol Beacon for 10 years. And the Bristol Beacon is noted, of course, for having changed its name from that of slave trader Edward Colston in 2020. This change came at a time when the Victorian Concert Building is being completely transformed in the largest ever arts capital redevelopment in the southwest of England. So, as I mentioned, today's session will be chaired by our Director of Development, Deborah Larwood. So she will set the scene for us and then lead today's discussion with our panel. I'll be back at the end with some questions from the audience. So please send those over in the chat as we go along, and Victoria, our General Manager, will ensure those are picked up and fed over to me. So for now, I shall pass things over to you, Deborah.
Thanks so much, Alex, and a very good afternoon to everybody watching and to our panel. So a bit of landscape. Alex was just shared with us, of course, that as many of you will have seen, the Private Investment in Culture survey indicated that of all private investment in the cultural sector, only 15% is realised from corporate giving. The report, however, also noted that 29% of all corporate giving to the sector was recognised as in-kind donations, indicating that traditional corporate sponsorship and membership models are perhaps becoming outmoded, or that perhaps the cash partnerships are indeed more difficult to secure at this time. So with the picture that we're given, being that this in-kind support represents nearly a third of all our corporate giving, which is significant, we really wanted to use today's session to explore what a mutually beneficial partnership with a business could look like in the cultural sector. Here at Achates, each year we deliver a significant proportion of in-kind work to our clients as part of our own commitment as a business to supporting the sector. In the last year alone, this work was to the value of £30,000. And in addition, we've always made the commitment as a business of at least 10% of our profits going to the Cultural Philanthropy Foundation. Now, as many of you across the sector await the outcome of the current Arts Council England MPO process, which, as we know, is anticipated to be extremely competitive, it is also probably a pertinent time to think about the wider income model. Coupled with this, we know that those statutory and trust funders really do want and need to see nowadays that an organisation has explored multiple avenues to drive budget relieving support, so that they're not overly reliant on one source of support alone. Now, whilst in-kind support is far from a new income model, the crystal clarity now required from many statutory and trust funders about programme, project and activity outputs and outcomes and their impact on participants and audiences does start to open opportunities to think about true co-creation opportunities with possible corporate supporters, which can in turn drive mutual benefit and value through an integral and targeted approach. So, what does the evolution of corporate support look like? Will we see a further growth in-kind support, which is truly budget relieving, particularly as we continue to find ourselves in this period of ever increasing costs, and can only assume that corporate cash budgets will reduce further and organisations in the cultural sector will need to find more creative financial solutions to weather the challenges ahead? With all of this in mind, it is a useful reminder, perhaps, to note the importance of really capturing the value of any in-kind support that your organisation is in receipt of, both in your accounts, as well as when you're articulating this value clearly to other potential supporters in order to drive further support in future. We're going to be exploring all of this and more with today's fantastic panellists as we take a deep dive into in-kind partnerships across the performing arts to public art projects. I'd like to now at this point hand over to our panellists to kick off really, to introduce themselves in turn and their organisations and their work, but also to share a little bit about how they've established and delivered partnerships with corporates which incorporate in-kind support, as well as any thoughts on how corporate fundraising in the cultural sector might evolve in the future and what advice they would share in terms of best practice approaches. If I could come to you first, Rosa, I'd be lovely to hear your views.
Hello, thank you for having me today. I'm very delighted to talk to you all. Yes, I wanted to first, as asked by Achates, talk about Bristol Beacon and why I'm here, and then I'll go through some examples that we have delivered in terms of in-kind corporate partnerships, but also perhaps some from my past experience, because I've worked for festivals, orchestras and other organisations. So first off, Bristol Beacon is a cultural organisation based in the southwest of England. We were a charity established in 2011 to do two things. One was to take on the running of the regional concert hall, which was then named Colston Hall, and also to deliver a region-wide education programme. So we have done both of those things. I'm pleased to say. I've been here through the period of time that the charities existed. And so the building in the first instance is undergoing a huge transformation, as Alex mentioned. £107 million project makes it the largest ever arts redevelopment in the whole of the Southwest region. What we're building is really magnificent, 3 concert spaces, beautifully refurbished historic spaces, brand new, fabulous, state-of-the-art concert hall. So hope as many of you can come and have a look at that as possible. But on the education and community side, and which is really where the meat of the corporate opportunities, I think, lie. So we have a huge education program. We reach 92% of, we work in 92% of the region's schools, Bristol schools, I should say, not the region. We run programs of work with older people in the community, with children with disabilities, and many other different groups across the city. So in terms of in-kind partnerships, firstly, one of the major partnerships I wanted to talk through, and I felt this is the best way, sort of almost a case study, was the relationship we had that's linked to our capital programme. We looked very carefully, as I think Deborah's quite right to say, at budget impactful partnerships. I think lots of people get the opportunity to develop in-kind partnerships, perhaps aren't really linked to their bottom line, and they get offered lovely things and you think, oh, that's delightful, I'm pleased to take that, but actually what the hell am I going to do with it? So we were really clear to look first at what we needed, and what we recognized we needed on our building project was consultancy fees. That was a major budget line, and one we felt we could deliver real benefits in terms of in-kind. So we have developed an in-kind partnership with a law firm in the city of Bristol who actually have national reach. It's a 6-figure partnership in terms of scale. It absolutely hits the bottom line in terms of means that we don't have to pay those fees, which is fantastic. It was very, very clear from the outset that corporate partner would have a direct relationship with the capital program, so they were excited because they would be seen as capital partners, and we've built the program with them. So that's not the only benefit to us. I think when I was thinking about what makes a really, really powerful any corporate relationship really is when it's linked to purpose in the first instance, just not linked to cash. And I think more and more we as in the cultural sector are getting better at talking about our purpose. So it's linked to purpose, and Burgess Salmon, the company's name is very clear that they want a close linking with our purpose, which is bringing the joy of live music to as many people as possible, and the impact of it. But we also worked with them about what they wanted. So it was very bespoke, the partnership, and the various elements of the benefit as it stands is obviously consultancy fees on our behalf. That's the major benefit we receive from them, but other consultancy around legal advice as well. The other major benefit we receive from them is where we are able to offer lawyers who are interested in doing volunteering to young people across our program. So one of the programs I didn't mention actually was a industry development, so young people talent program, should have mentioned, of course. And so we've been able to offer our young people business mentoring, IP advice, so in terms of sessions and across the year. And so they were the main benefits that we received as an organisation, but they receive quite a lot of benefits in kind as well. So they get staff engagement opportunities. We've done a number of projects with them, some of which have maybe perhaps cost them additional, but they've chosen to work with us on those partnerships because they have a pre-existing relationship with us. They if they need advice about anything musical, or they might need for a party, then we're their first go-to. It seems like a small thing, but they really they find that a really useful thing. And yeah, they're essentially the things. Staff engagement was the major thing, and the other big thing that we offered them that was quite tangible was a staff membership. So they receive all the staff receive a free Bristol Beacon membership as part of it. Well, yeah, so that's our in-kind benefit. Yeah, that was the sort of a really core relationship that's been absolutely fantastic for the bottom line of the project. And we've used it in all sorts of different ways and continue to use it. Other major partnerships that I've worked on in my time, one particular one that actually was very significant for the organisation I worked for was Salisbury International Arts Festival. Had a media partnership with the Telegraph for 3 years. That at the time it was signed up, you know, the festival at the time was sort of larger, smaller profile. It's probably on the sort of smaller scale of profile when I first arrived, but thanks to a media partnership with the Telegraph worth sort of 150,000 a year in terms of advertising, we, you know, really increased our profile for certainly that period and the period afterwards, and that the benefits were on both sides. So we received fantastic free promotional opportunities. We were allowed to, we were given the opportunity to do interviews, in-depth interviews, and we had some pieces in the paper, you know, pieces, not just advertorials, but sort of interview pieces. And their benefits were, they were accessing tickets, and, you know, probably more traditional sponsorship benefits at a festival event. It was fantastic for us, well, a small to medium-sized arts organisation to get a national platform. And as we all know, the outside world really pays attention to things like that. So it made a huge difference for us. I think, I mean, well, Alex, you're going to field questions. Actually, the other questions, actually going back to Deborah's questions, I know you asked about evolution and best practice. So taking those two questions, I would think best practice, as I suggested before, it really feels like, for me, as the cultural sector gets better and better at talking about purpose, that we link our corporate relationships to our purpose. It's very easy to have transactional sort of financial relationships that just feel like maybe an exchange of money for tickets. But the more we can talk about our purpose to to commercial organizations, I think that the better it is for both sides. We've always worked on a very bespoke basis. We don't have a pre-package before we meet with corporates. We absolutely are responsive to the conversation in the room, and it's relationship based, as most of fundraising is, but we seek, you know, relationships with good people who seek to do good in their city, and we offer them an opportunity to do that. So the relationships with Burgess Salmon, for instance, they link to our sustainability ambition, they're linking to our you know, the impact we're making across the city. And where do I think the evolution will be for corporate relationships? I think it has to be about purpose. It's as it gets harder, we focus more on just commerciality, but it needs and must be the opposite. And the more comfortable we are about talking about, you know, purpose, the better. But I also think it's being really, really honest with yourselves about benefits. Commercial organisations are looking for benefits, and they need to be delivered, and you need to deliver them, and you need to force delivery on them. You need to make sure that it is delivered, even if they don't sort of request it. So one of the things we're really, really good at is having a really solid plan of activation for the corporate sponsor as well, and making sure that if we've promised them staff engagement, that we absolutely deliver some staff engagement. And we don't get to the end of the year and say, I'm sorry, you know, you didn't seem to want it, so therefore we didn't deliver it. We have regular check-in meetings, and also you've got a named contact. So I've mixed between quite practical advice, I think, and kind of general statements, but hopefully useful.
Absolutely fantastic, Rosa. Thank you. There's so much in there, and I've already sort of formulating a few additional questions to ask you a little down the line. I think, you know, the thing that really jumps out at me is absolutely, you know, start by looking at what you as an organisation need. So be really clear about, you know, where the need is. And the other beautiful point I think you made was, be responsive to the conversation. So, find something which is bespoke, create something exciting and something tailored. And of course, it's always, as you say, it's about relationships. Really, really interesting as well, the point about sort of staff engagement. I think, the example of the law firm that you've given that I would love to talk a little more about later. There's something really interesting there about, yes, of course, the staff sort of volunteering and engagement benefits your participants, but of course it's also great for their own professional development. And I think that there's always something really, that there's a trick that you have to be really on it in terms of activation. And sometimes actually that staff engagement can be a lot of legwork for a cultural organisation, because you will need to, in most cases, support them into the staff engagement opportunity. And I think that can never be underestimated. So there is always more work behind the scenes. I think it's about being really, to have a clear understanding of what it will take to realise those plans. Brilliant, thank you so much. Mayan, let's come to you and hear a little bit more about your work at Artichoke.
Yeah, really interesting, Rosa. Thanks for having me. So just to set the scene with Artichoke, we work with artists to invade our public spaces, and our events take about 2 to 3 years in the planning and last about 4 days. They're never in the same place. So yes, we have no venue, no tickets, everything we do is free, everything we do is outdoors, and that comes with several challenges, and that doesn't stop the Inkind challenge. So even though we've had huge success with Inkind, it's not any easier. So just to summarize the kind of categories that I personally have received Inkind support from, the most significant in terms of like 6-figure sums are really boring. So they come normally from councils. So when we get commissions and we're applying a project with the council and they give us a certain amount of money and we deliver projects, so obviously we deliver these kind of large scale outdoor arts events, but obviously there's learning and participation, there's like project and new opportunities, there's lots of different strands. So as part of that kind of commissioning, we are really good, or have become much better at saying at the outset, okay, well, can we add to this commissioning lump sum you're giving us things about like waste disposal? We don't want to have to pay for like getting rid of the bins, and we don't want to have to pay for road closures and traffic management, because normally if you do a kind of one-off event, sometimes those things do, the council will charge you some money, and that really, really racks up. And that is something that we've got better at discussing at the earlier stages, and that's very much a senior level kind of activity. It's not like a fundraising call afterwards saying, oh, by the way, you can get some free refuge collection. So we're really good at that, and I highly recommend anyone listening thinks about those kind of added extras in any kind of commissioning conversations. The second one for us, as I said before, we're always somewhere different. So we tend to be, I don't know if it's the right thing to say, but we tend to be less strategic and more opportunistic, because that's just what we have to be. So a lot of our kind of in-kind support comes from lighting and technical and kind of solid services and goods, and that can range from generators, coal, projectors, which are very expensive, and very expensive, to hire and to service as well. Even if you get it in kind, there is always a service fee. So we use a lot of technical and lighting equipment for our light festival in Durham called Lumiere. It's a 4-day light festival. It's the only event that we produce on repeat, and that is why most of my examples come from Lumiere, which was in Durham. So most of my examples are connected to that, but there's literally hundreds of them. Next kind of biggest category is media partnerships. At the moment with Artichoke, we're actually working with the out-of-home industry. So that is companies like JC Deco and Clear Channel, who do the adverts on bus stops, train stations, all those kind of beautiful digital screens that you see on Shoreditch High Street, on the South Bank Centre. And we're running an art campaign with them. And the value of that is significant. It's in the millions. And without the partnership, we couldn't be doing the project, because out-of-home advertising is very expensive. So we spend a little bit of money with them, and in return they give us this huge in-kind voidage support. And that is probably the biggest in-kind partnership we've done in terms of talking about that purpose that Rosa was speaking about. It is quite strategic. It wouldn't happen without each other, and it isn't opportunistic. This has been a long conversation that has finally come to fruition, and we're about to launch it on Monday, so you'll learn a bit more. Look out for the gallery. We already had a pilot season, but the new one is launching on Monday. So anybody, an artist who want to apply to feature on said massive billboards, keep an eye out for it. Other kind of categories that we tend to do, which is not as valuable but no less important, is food and beverage. So if somebody wants to donate a dinner or a party, stuff like that, it's not necessarily huge value, but it does have a return on investment, which is obviously really high because we don't spend any money from it. So we always use that as cultivation opportunities. If we want to have a posh dinner but don't want to pay for it, obviously we've got lots of supporters. We've had dinners at Fortnum & Mason's, in private banks, the Cook's dining room, kind of those you can't really buy them opportunities, and they have been very valuable in terms of what we get in return. So if someone will come to dinner and obviously maybe sign up to be a member or donate, whereas if we just paid for a normal dinner somewhere not very special, we probably wouldn't get the good turnout that we would. That's kind of the lower end of the scale. It's kind of what Rosa was suggesting, the fluffy stuff that we don't necessarily want but actually is quite nice. And yeah, really low level stuff that does have financial return is raffle and auction prizes, that kind of thing that we normally kind of work locally, but that auctions can raise 100,000, so it's no small feat, but they're not as common. Just back to the media partnership, sorry, I've done a bit more at a different organisation. I've worked with Sky Arts, Classic FM, various publications. So even if you have a partnership with a publication, that has no budget relieving value technically. However, if you can offer things like a Meet the Boss article for one of your top corporate sponsors, that is really valuable. And it's about, even if that opportunity comes through a communications team, if you're in there and you have a relationship with them, you can flag those kind of opportunities to say, well, instead of just advertising for the festival, could we have a series of opportunities to promote fundraising, future fundraising opportunities. So yeah, I think one of the questions was how to work cross-departmentally. I'm sure everyone would agree that it can be a bit of a nightmare sometimes, but sometimes that's when you spot the best opportunities, when you actually sit down and see what other people are working on, because somewhere that we have got a lot of our introductions from are suppliers. So someone in your production or creative team will be working with, I don't know, like some boring company that they think nothing of, and actually, they love working with us. They always come to all of our events, and then if they were to be approached and say, actually, do you want a bigger partnership from this? We will pay you some money, but you could donate all the services or goods in kind. Then we can make a bigger splash of the partnership. And a lot of the time, it's never occurred to anyone in that certain team that actually, we don't mind asking people for money or support. Like it's no skin off our nose. People are uncomfortable with it. We are not. If they say no to us, it's no big deal. We move on to the next one. With the kind of more funner partnerships like Sky Arts and Classic FM, Sky Arts wanted to film a carol concert I was doing, and that was great. But that was going to be really disruptive to my audience, to my kind of high net worth individuals who love coming to the church and they love seeing all the kids sing. And it was going to be a huge imposition. And the only way that I could really justify it to myself was if they paid for the carol concert. So that year was an absolute banger. We paid as many people as normally we can't pay anyone, but it was so lovely to be able to pay the pianist to sing with the kids choir and really make a big deal of it. And it was nothing to Sky Arts, but it really helped us maintain relationships. And everything that we made from the carol concert money wise was about 50,000 was just straight into our pockets. So, but that was opportunistic. That wasn't something that we sought out. It was an approach to us, and as long as it comes through the fundraising team, there's always a way to make money from it. I've got lots of considerations, but I don't want to wait for the questions. But sometimes these partnerships are total and utter disaster. So I was very impressed with Rosa and her strategic, kind of smooth strategy examples, because I was thinking, oh, that sounds lovely. I want to come and work at the Bristol Beacon. Yeah, we've learned a lot of lessons. So my top 3 things for advice for any company, charity thinking about it, is to set budgets well in advance. If it's not on the budget, I'm not spending any time on it until it's like 2 weeks to go. I'm not wasting time finding festoon lighting that only costs £30 if it's not even in the budget. It's only high value, which would get a priority, because as we know, cash is still king, and that is always going to be the number one. Second thing would be managing expectations. Our crew that we work with for our big projects pretty much actually won't work with several in-kind of our partners. They announce, because we had one incident once where generators weren't serviced, and we had got all these amazing free generators for this project that was about to go live, and they didn't work, and nobody would come and service them because it was an in-kind partnership and no one really took it very seriously. Total disaster. Ended up spending more money to get replacement, and that was our fault, because that hadn't even occurred to me to talk or discuss about the kind of servicing. So there's some things that we don't mess around with anymore, but that's why managing expectations is really good. And yeah, the third thing is just explore your network and see what opportunities for in-kind support exists. But that's if you take the opportunistic approach like we do, because we don't have the luxury of knowing what's coming. We always, yeah, it's always somewhere different and somewhere new. And we would love to have an in-kind partnership for the company, and we do, but they're much lower level. They're dinners, they're wine, champagne, that kind of things, which are lovely, but ultimately we wouldn't pay for them if we didn't have to. So I think the 2 main questions were evolving and best practice. Evolving. Yeah, I don't know. I still just want money. I know I don't want to be controversial, but I don't want it to evolve. I think in-kind is great, but we cannot take away from the fact that without money, we cannot deliver these projects, and we don't want to be servicing the agenda of companies just because of in-kind support. But it's the same with anything, and in-kind support can be fun. The consultation is actually probably the best example I've heard, actually. And we have done some work with Arup for engineering services, but you know, I guess again we possibly wouldn't have paid for it. So it's yeah, it's a fine balance. And best practice, I mean, I'm just going to roll with it, to be honest. Just going to roll with it and set expectations and make sure your generators work. That's my advice. Yeah, so I think I'm done. Just go back on mute.
Thank you so much, Mayanne. So many brilliant points and really beautifully made. I think what's really interesting is that thing of, you know, what do we need versus what is nice to have? And as you say, quite rightly, you know, so often cash really is king. But if it's not cash, if it is in kind, that, you know, it is about the bottom line to ensure that you can deliver your plans. If you can do additional things, then that's marvelous. But it can't be at the expense, I suppose, of losing, you know, what your sort of core, what your core is and what supports your core. There's something really interesting as well, I think, in your particular organisation, in terms of the types of in-kind partnerships that you've referenced. I can only imagine that they really rely on, as a fundraiser, you understanding sort of the nuts and bolts of how work is going to be made and realised, as well as understanding the impact. Because, you know, if you're looking for some of those suppliers to be in kind, I can imagine you might find yourself in some more technical conversations than you may have otherwise been in. And the last thing I wanted to just pick up on was look beyond the obvious. What a great piece of advice. Who are the people that are already connected to your organisation? Who are the, you know, the suppliers that you use on a regular basis, who may have never considered that actually there is a world where they can have a relationship which is based on in kind. There is so much there. I already had a list of questions and now I have many more, but I'm very conscious of time, so I'm going to be as selective as I can be. And I'd really like to start actually with the idea of an in-kind partnership, which sitting alongside the sort of the process of procurement, partly because of the Arup example that was just cited, but also I know earlier, Rosie, you were talking about law firm consultancy when you were looking at the sort of capital costs. How does the sort of procurement process of an organisation sit alongside selecting an in-kind corporate partner, and how do you navigate a process like that? I wonder, Rosa, could I come to you first on that to share your thoughts?
Mm-hmm. So you're saying, how do we identify the lines of potential income or need, and then how do we find the person to fulfill it? Well, I guess that the finding of the lines is, I do think, it's really, really interesting. Maya answered really well. I do think there are core areas where you receive in kind, and sort of if you, and they are the same, you are completely right. I wanted to add a few more. I was writing them down. I should have done it first. But yes, consultancy fees, food and beverage. I'd also add hotel rooms. There's a really great thing there. Travel is another big thing that I looked at, and then media, obviously. So if you kind of go through that, the set area where they might work, or they mostly sit, and then work out where you can do it. And in terms of finding it, goodness, ours have always been opportunistic, but I think actually a lot of fundraising is opportunistic. Well, it's network fundraising, which is the way of making opportunism more likely, isn't it? So it's once again looking to your networks and creating opportunities where you'll meet people. So we met the sponsor who we have, Burgess Salmon, at a series of events that we ran to engage the corporate community. They came forward as somebody who was interested in a major partnership, in conversation, very much in conversation. So that we do a lot of events like that where we meet people from the corporate sector, all sorts of different people, and then we build partnerships, then opportunistically slot them in. But I have to say, I apologize if I made it sound neat and tidy, because it is certainly not that. It's never. I was thinking about one of my absolute favorite of all time in-kind sponsorships was an in-kind one at Salisbury Festival, where we basically persuaded, we wanted to livery a car that we'd been donated for the festival. Somebody wanted to pay for the livery, and it was just amazing, because scooting around Salisbury was this lovely bright coloured car with our branding all over it. You never ever in a million years would have dreamed of even thinking about that as a budget line in a tiny weeny festival, but it does somehow make what is quite a small fleet of foot program look bigger to the outside, as puffs you up a little bit. And actually there's nothing bad in that, because then the local community are like, wow, look at that thing skidding around, they've got some stuff going on. So yeah. I don't know if I've answered that question.
No, you have, you absolutely have. And actually it sort of goes on quite neatly to the other thought I was having, which I think we've touched quite a bit actually on the idea of these media partnerships and media partnerships which are in kind. What's really interesting, I think, is that of course any media partnership would never be solely delivered by development professionals within an organisation. So there's a golden opportunity, I suppose, to draw in other colleagues from across, whether it be marketing, comms, senior leadership. Marianne, I wonder if I could come to you on this. I'm keen to hear your thoughts on, to what extent can a corporate in-kind partnership, I suppose media or otherwise, help to benefit internal relationships and I suppose deepen the understanding of the value of fundraising?
Oh, such a good question. So we have our organisation falls into 4 main teams. So it's finance and admin, development, which is obviously where I sit, creative and production, and comms. So it's not massive. We're 17 person organisation, and as you're talking about the technical and the kind of knowing the nuts and bolts of how things work, it is. I could not identify a cherry picker from a telescopic handler kind of before I came to work at Artitope, but now I can spot them a mile off. And when I first started, there was a lot of going through spreadsheets, and I was literally just Googling who does projectors and finding out, what companies actually do it. And, and you have to ask your production team, because you just spend hours Googling. So they learned a lot about what was useful for us. Why are we asking all these questions? And because obviously you may speak to someone at the top about what's budget relief and blah, 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 but by the time you kind of get to like your peers or more junior, they don't really get it, and they may hear about it in meetings, but a lot of people who come into these roles don't even really understand what fundraising is anyway. So while we, for the first kind of couple of years, I've worked in almost every Lumiere festival, pestered them for information, it's now flipped. So now we'll get like someone running over like really early in the fundraising campaign going, oh, here's our in-kind list, you know, and here's what we love. And in a way it's great because we can kind of go through and be like, no, ooh, yes, you know, because I kind of know where the value of things sits. So I know a lot about what costs them money and what is not worth my hassle, and I'm not getting free toilets, they can pay for themselves. So I've learned, but obviously there's a flip side to that, because now, you know, people will expect you to do will hope that you can provide something for them when it's just not your priority. You're not messing around getting Portaloo toilets when you've got money to raise to actually deliver the project. But, you know, it's all about managing expectations and having good conversations. Comms, I find, is much trickier. I don't know if Rosa found this, but you have worked in comms, so you probably are the person that you're fighting with. But yeah, that's a slightly slower burn, I guess, in understanding each other. But it has been about, you got to basically stick your ear in and just find out what's happening. And even if they think it's not really development related, we will always find a way in to make it development related. And, you know, we have this wonderful series of with Northern Echo, that's how glam we are. That's a Meet the Boss article every month. So every month we can offer a sponsor this opportunity. And otherwise, if we hadn't spotted that, it just would have been an advert for the Lumiere Festival. I mean, great, but why not kill two birds with one stone? So yeah, and we've also helped them in return. Like we once were speaking to a media company for sponsorship. They were like, no, but you know, we could help you make a film. And we were like, well, film's no use to us. And then it was like, well, actually, might be useful to comms. And now they hold that relationship, and that is great. And they've learned a bit more about relationship building, which is very different. Comms and development, as what I've learned, it's less about advising and informing. It's more about nurturing and stewarding, trying to always be nice. If you're getting something for free, you have to be nice, and you maybe have to lower your expectations just a little. So yeah, in terms of interdepartmental negotiations, it's been great. The one tricky thing is actually how you mark and value in kind in the accounts. So finance and admin, yeah, to be honest, I'm not gonna lie, I still don't really understand it. I think we add or take away the value depending on what is useful for our finance director. If there's going to be a VAT issue on either side, we have to consider that. He does that. If something is really high value to us, but actually wasn't budgeted for, then it's, in a way, doesn't really count. But then if it doesn't count, then why are we doing it? And it's a constant kind of negotiation battle of we're not going to waste our time on in-kind if it doesn't count. So there's a conversation between the technical and the finance team to decide what is important and what isn't. And it's all about budget relieving, but obviously budgets go up and down constantly when you're developing, you know, not quite £6 million each, but like £3 million projects. So yeah, VAT, I mean, it's a whole other issue. We had a big thing with the home industry. They wouldn't sign the contract because we were offering too much, and then it would have VAT implications, blah, blah, blah. So we had to offer very little, and then it felt a bit like, oh, you're literally giving us all this stuff and we're giving you nothing. But, you know, everyone's been okay with it so far. But yeah.
Rosa, I think you wanted to come in on that, and I've got some thoughts I'll share in a moment. Go for it.
Yeah, VAT is a really interesting one. When I, as a previous organisation, we haven't done it here, but we did quite a lot of work on how in-kind can actually improve your VAT situation. So particularly with large partnerships, one of the things you can do is cross-invoice as organisations and claim VAT back. So the arts organisation that's able to reclaim VAT is able to reclaim VAT on the gift or on the amount of value. So it's how you make an in-kind partnership actually worth some money to your organisation. So that's one point I wanted to make about that. That's really, it does complicate it a lot with in-kind partnerships, but it can be fruitful. And then I just wanted to say one other thing, particularly about sparked by something Mayan said about the films, is we've had a couple of partnerships actually where it's cash and in-kind together, and they've been really, really great. So exactly that, sort of where you might have a cash element for, we've got a television production company who are one of our sponsors, but actually part of that deal is that they're going to make us film. So their benefit back to us, I suppose, is films, but the value of the film far outweighs the, we would never be able to afford films of that quality and that sort of, breadth. So yeah, a combination of the two can also be really powerful. Sorry, I'm sure you've got something else to say.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. I have so many more questions for you, but I know that our viewers do too. So I'm going to hold on to my questions and seek you out online later. But for now, I'm going to just say thank you so much. I've thoroughly enjoyed hearing about the work you're both doing. And I think it's interesting. I said earlier about sort of the traditional in-kind model. I think you've both proven in your overviews that you've generously given that you can be really creative. And I think that's very exciting. That's probably all from me for now. I'm going to hand over to Alex, who I know has got some questions from the floor to put to you both.
That was great. Thank you both so much. I have some really interesting questions that have come through. So let's kick off because I know time is ticking. So the question is, do you think there's a difference between local business in-kind support and national business in-kind support in terms of driving shared benefits and value for your organisation? So that was really quite interesting. It's not something we've talked about specifically. Mayan, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, so I guess most of our in-kind partnerships have been regional because that is how we work. It's not to say that we haven't worked with some big brands. Whether which are more important, I mean, to be honest, I feel like the regional ones are more important because we're returning to Durham year on year and we have to treat them really, really well. But the national ones do tend to be higher value and maybe a little bit sexier. Like Hargreaves Cole doesn't quite ring the same as like JC Decor or Clear Channel. But sometimes we spend as much effort trying to get £1,000 worth of coal from a company than we do trying to navigate like a 6-figure partnership. So, but you can't really know you've done that until it's over. And then you go, oh well. So yeah, regional is very important to us. And I mean, national is just fantastic. Like if we love more national in-kind partners, but they are hard to come by. And regional is tough because some of those regional companies are national, but we work with one regional company in Durham and then we say, can we speak to your head office so we can speak to another company in another area, and they're just not interested. So yeah, I love working with both. I particularly like working with the regional ones because you just have a better relationship when they're a bit smaller and you can give a lot more back, I think. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. I think you're right that working with regional companies, it feels like there's a more kind of easy access to synergy between you and them and the product. Rosa, what's your experience of regional versus national?
Well, I think you're more important to the regional partner. That's the other way around. So you feel they are really excited, and so therefore the relationship is all the richer. But you're right, the highest value is definitely national. I mean, for me, it's interesting because I've worked for, well, particularly festivals. I always think, well, one-off events like you're doing at Artichoke and big, large scale, and festivals tend to have more of a national footprint. We do a lot of national work, Bristol Beacon, but the in-kind partnerships tend to be more regional. Because people are passionate about their local venue, the thing that's local to them.
That's great, thank you. Let's move on then. A question about evaluation and monitoring. So obviously there are lots of sort of established mechanisms for reporting around certain types of donation, like grants or even individual donations. Have you embedded particular processes around evaluation and monitoring and reflecting on the value of the in-kind partnerships and how you report back to the partners themselves? Rosa, do you want to carry on and talk a bit about that?
That's a really interesting question because we're looking at this at the moment, my team and I. Yes, we have in the past. I think we'd always looked a lot at, say media impressions as a really major opportunity because most in-kind partners are looking at their profile raising. Yes, we always talk about purpose, but often they're interested in that sort of link. So we would look at, what media value we'd had. We always evaluate, and we always send a report, a really fulsome report. the mechanisms are one thing, but just the reality of sending something that celebrates a partnership is really, really important. And on an annual cycle, we do another lovely thing, I think, well, the people here seem to love it, is we put we do a little poster celebrating our partnership, and almost whenever I go around to any of the offices, they've always got their little poster up in the pre-framed, get it sent around. They're always really excited about that, so that's feeds back into the local.
That's really interesting. Mayan, what's your thoughts on evaluation and kind of reporting?
Evaluation reporting. So in terms of feeding back to in-kind sponsors, we treat them, using Lumiere as the example, we treat them exactly the same as a cash sponsor, depending on their value or how we value it. So they would receive the same kind of reporting as a cash sponsor. I wouldn't say it's light touch, but we don't do kind of social media impressions or anything like that for all of our sponsors, because we have about 80 for the festival. So we would just be there forever. We just do like the top 10. We've definitely had informal conversations where people will be like, oh, I didn't think I got as much as I wanted, or, but that's just a conversation. Then we say, well, great. Well, we didn't know you wanted this, because when we offered it to you, you just were so excited, and you didn't really know what was possible until you saw the festival, and now we got a clear idea. So this is great. We can definitely offer this next time. We also do a sponsor evaluation in person, like a face-to-face external one, and we include in-kind sponsors in that. So we treat them kind of using that data for the next time is really important to us, regardless of if they're cash or in kind. I don't know if that's the right or wrong answer, but certainly when you're working somewhere repeatedly, those people that are donating those branded jackets that you don't even like are politically very important in the area, and you have to kind of treat them with the respect they deserve. And the jackets are actually great now; they're really good. Started off being awful, but now they're lovely. So yeah, in terms of reporting kind of stats and stuff, not really, unless it's really high value, which the council doesn't really care about kind of stuff. They want different kind of valuations. Yeah, sorry, that's a really bad answer.
I'm wondering if even if it's sort of top line reflections on partnerships, do they help motivate renewals, do you think, or do you think it's something a bit more visceral than that, might push over the line that renewal of an in-kind relationship?
I mean, we send a beautiful document that outlines the partnership and the festival and everything. So we make an effort and we make it look great, and we always try and feature them on socials and capture that to even if they hadn't seen it, we report back to it. But yeah, very rarely do we have someone that doesn't come on board. So we must be doing an okay job.
Sounds like it. Did you say 80 partnerships?
Yeah, and that's not including all the kind of gala auction prize winners. We're trying to streamline it, actually. We've just got a new head of development. He's like, oh, let's just get more sponsors for higher figures. And I'm like, that would be amazing, but good luck.
It feels like a whole separate Achates Live is how to manage 80 corporate partners. So maybe that's... maybe
I'm not going to lie, sometimes it's an absolute. But, you just got to fight through it. But we always, because they know us and we're nice to them when we can be, it's always good.
That's great. I'm conscious of time, so I feel like maybe we should wind up today, approaching 3 o'clock. I just want to say a huge thank you to you both, Rosa and Mayan, and to Deborah, of course, for chairing. So as you know, here at Achates, we offer a range of services from prospect research, recruitment and strategy development to shaping and implementing partnership models, supporting cultivation and bid writing. So if you're interested in discussing how we might be able to support you, or if you'd just like to speak to a member of the team, then please do just drop us a line at info@achates.org.uk. Also, a brief reminder that deadline for nominations for the Achates Philanthropy Prize is fast approaching. This celebrates examples of first-time cultural philanthropy, and the deadline is this Monday, the 12th of September, and we'd absolutely love to receive a final few nominations over the weekend. Finally, a note to let you know that our next Achates Live event will be on Thursday, the 13th of October 2022 at 2 p.m. There'll be more details to follow on that soon, so keep an eye on your inboxes. So it just remains for me to say a huge thank you again to Rosa and to Mayan and to Deborah for chairing, and we're really grateful that you've all joined us today, and we'll